excited about it, and also those of us online. We ask that you do a few housekeeping things before we get it rolling all together. We'll let you know that I am Rachel Kniser. You'll hear a little bit more about me in just a moment. But we are looking forward to meeting with you today and through this school year. This is our biggest launch, and we think of that, or our biggest NGA meeting, and we think of that because this is the start of it all. So welcome to the beginning. I feel like that might be ominous. If you're joining online, please make sure that you are on mute, and turn off video if you're not speaking. That way your bandwidth is preserved, as is ours, and we can make the meeting as seamless as possible. We are recording this meeting and we'll have it posted as soon as possible to our website, and we'll link it out through the shared LEA folder, as well as let you know what's up in our NGA bulletins. If you can, please sign in. There's a link on the PowerPoint, or use the QR code that you see attached to the PowerPoint as well. And once we get this presentation out to you, you'll have a whole host of resources that we add to. That means our bulletins, our weekly or biweekly newsletters. You'll see presentations. You'll have policy information for the year. We try and get you as much as we can, as soon as we can. We also like to make sure that we all have the same understanding of our relationship here and what we provide to you as OSSE. We, in conjunction with our stakeholders, create a comprehensive educational assessment program that does three big things. We want to accurately measure student performance. We want that student performance to provide actionable data and give you tools and guidance and training to empower you to meet the needs of everyone in your school, in your network, wherever you may be, so that you can make informed decisions. This meeting today will help provide some of those foundational information pieces to get that actionable data collected and then back out to you. We want to introduce ourselves. We had a meeting in August, but this is sort of the big one. And we're all actually like in person in a room. So you get to see us thanks to technology. We want to explain how LEA managers, which is mostly what you are instrumental in the oversight and coordination of substantive assessments. It is a relationship and we cannot do it without you. So we want to make sure that we are here to support you in the best ways that we can. We want to provide a high-level overview of the school year. This does not get into the nitty-gritty of what happens when. Those questions and trainings will come later. But this will give you the breadth of knowledge to get the school year started, the assessment part of the school year started. And we'll go over the policies that help determine who gets tested, why, what those outcomes look like. And then we'll just tap into ways that we can communicate. That includes these meetings as well as bulletins and ways that we can keep in touch besides what we give to you. You're always welcome to reach out to us. So we'll do the brief introduction. Go into the test administration. You'll get to know what we do in terms of statewide assessments for DC. We'll talk about the policies that inform all statewide testing, not specific rules and regulations of individual assessments. Then we'll talk about when you get to see us and hear from us next. It will be sooner rather than later. I don't know if that's a promise or a threat, but both things are happening. So I'm going to pass it off to our director of the Office of Assessments, Stephanie Snyder. You may have heard before.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us in person and virtually. Well, very happy to see everyone. I know that over the last year or so, the OSSE Office of Assessments has gone through a number of transitions. So just wanted to reintroduce the team. Some folks are newer than others, but I just wanted you to know who is who and be able to put faces with names. And at some point throughout today's meeting, you'll get to see everyone. So I know those who can see the team, but those online, rest assured, you will see everyone's faces as well. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Stephanie Snyder. I am the Director of Assessments here at OTI. Our assessment specialist for mathematics is Yolanda Barber. And our assessment specialist for ELA is Rachel Nizer, and those two folks will be your main points of contact with all things art related. Chelsea Charland is our assessment specialist for science, and she is your point person for both DC science and the DLM assessments. Assad Fulton is our assessment specialist for special populations, and he is your point of contact for MSAA, our multi-state alternate assessment, as well as access for ELAs and generally accommodations policies across the statewide assessments. Lavinia Ringgold is our assessment specialist for test security, and she is your point person when we will get into school test security plans and test security training. And once we get into administration, she'll also be the point person when we're talking about incident reporting and making sure that test security is at the forefront of administration. And finally, Cassidy Shinley is our NAEP state coordinator, and he is the point person, obviously, for NAEP, which is a smaller year this year, but you will see him around supporting the team in a lot of different ways. I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to walk through the suite of statewide assessments in DC.
In DC, we have 6 major statewide assessments, ranging from NAEP, which is an annual and selective statewide assessment, to those that we know well, such as PARCC and DC Science. We also provide statewide assessments for special populations, such as our English language learners. For that, we get WIDA, or Access is the technical name term, WIDA is the consortium. We also have 2 assessments for students with severe, special needs. That's MSAA and dynamic learning capacity, DLM. In other states, sometimes we call it HAIC. But those will be the 2 assessments for students with pronounced cognitive impairment. Our testing windows really began with Access in mid-February. It's the launch of the heaviest season, but that does not mean your work starts solely in mid-February and carries through the end of May. Your work begins far sooner with test windows that overlap and schedules that need to be made. You'll end up working sooner rather than later. And you'll start making even decisions for our special populations within the next month or so. That's what I'm talking about. Another way to look at it is just by a calendar, where you can see there's a significant portion of March and April that overlap with one another, specifically MSAA and DLM, as well as PARCC and DC Science. We encourage you to learn the calendar and start planning as soon as you possibly can. You know your LEA better than anyone, and getting schools to start mapping schedules, knowing what the testing windows are, really helps. You also want to think about grouping the testing together as much as you possibly can, and think specifically about PARCC. PARCC actually begins 2 weeks before spring break instead of 1 week before spring break, which gives your LEA more opportunity to test before it can stop to spring break. And it gives you time at the end to potentially do your makeups. So really think about your breaks in conjunction with the overlap of the testing windows. Another way to think, and we'll release this as soon as we can get this out to you. The document here, the assessment activity schedule, is color-coded to align with each of the sort of major testing blocks. And you'll see that some of the preparation that you've done has already begun in terms of identifying students. And you'll really begin test security around. So thanks. Just make sure we're muted. It's very strange when it comes from another device. Your work really begins now in planning and preparation, long before the testing window begins. You're here as LEA managers, which means that you oversee and coordinate all of the testing for your area. That means most of your work is highlighted in the yellow boxes. You may do everything from gathering student information and schedules to registering students for a test. While it may seem like your work trails off as test administration begins, those of you who are experienced know that it does not at all. In fact, you're probably doing more because you will know all the pieces that the test coordinators also need to know, because they will see you as a resource. And that's where we can help too. You can use us as a resource, and we can help answer some of those questions related to the responsibilities that may be seemingly outside of your purview, but nothing is. And that takes us to what your responsibilities actually are. I'm going to switch off and Stephanie's going to come back up.
Thanks, Rachel. So we've talked a lot about LEA assessment managers, and we will be getting more into what we mean by that, and some additional roles and responsibilities across different personnel within LEAs. So this graphic is an attempt to disentangle some of the names that kind of sound similar, but have slightly different roles. So the LEA assessment manager is the person at your LEA who's responsible for representing your LEA at OSSE NGA meetings and really communicating with OSSE about assessment administration within your LEA. And they also are ensuring overall compliance with any testing regulations and test security. But that LEA assessment manager may appoint up to 3 LEA assessment coordinators for each of the statewide assessment programs. So there may be an LEA assessment manager, but then LEA coordinators for access, for Park and DC Science, and MSAA DLM. In many LEAs, particularly smaller ones, the LEA assessment manager may play multiple roles so that there may not be different people in the manager and coordinator role, but just wanted to kind of disentangle what those mean. So in some larger LEAs, there may be 1 overall assessment manager and then up to 3 assessment coordinators for each of the programs. And those assessment coordinators oversee the administration of the assessments in their particular portfolio, and is also another person who ensures that tests are administered in accordance with all of the testing administration manuals and compliance with DC Testing Integrity Act. And then there are school test coordinators and school test administrators. So at the school level, there will be 1 person in charge of making sure schools or tests are administered appropriately at the school level. And then test administrators are the folks who are actually in classrooms with the students, giving the administration instructions and ensuring that tests are being administered appropriately. And all of this is just an overview. There is a lot of documentation that OSSE will be releasing in the next couple of weeks that goes into more detail about all of these roles. One thing that we want to plug, and it's been in the NGA bulletins over the last couple of months, is that OSSE does need to collect information from each LEA about who you have appointed as your LEA assessment manager for this year, as well as non-public school test coordinators. And just a word about non-public school test coordinators, many of the functions of the LEA test coordinator will fall into the bucket of responsibilities non-public school test coordinator at your particular site. But non-public school test coordinators are also meant to be liaising with LEA assessment managers for students who you serve from those LEAs. But that contact information is due to OSSI a week from today, October 14th. And the link to that form is in this deck, which we'll be sending out, but it's also in the last several NGA bulletins. So please, if you have not yet done so, complete that form to let OSSI know who your LEA assessment manager and LEA test coordinators will be, so that we can make sure you're getting all of the communication about assessment administration for this year. Another document that I mentioned will be coming out in the next couple of weeks from OSSI is this document called Coordinating School Year 22-23 Statewide Assessments. It is an extensive document and it provides a really high level overview of statewide test administration broadly in DC. It goes into more detail about roles and responsibilities, about test security, about who to contact at OSSI if you have questions, and is a good general introduction, particularly if you're new to the role this year. It gives a good background on what you can expect from statewide administration in DC. I will note that while the statewide assessments document is something in the neighborhood of 40 pages, it does not replace other trainings and other interactions with OSSI that you have, like meetings. The guide is not a replacement for that. There's much more detailed information that we give in trainings throughout the assessment season. And there are also vendor-specific trainings for some of the assessments that are required for coordinators and or test administrators. But it is a good high-level guide to what to expect from assessment administration in DC. One thing that is new for 22-23, which I wanted to highlight, is we will be offering an orientation for folks who are new to the role of LEA assessment manager or LEA test coordinator. And this is similar to the coordinating statewide assessments document. Is a really high level overview of what to expect from administration, statewide administration in DC from now, October, through the end of this season in June-ish. So it's a good opportunity to make connections with other folks who are new to the role, but also get a little bit more in depth about expectations, because the meeting that we have here, we know we have a mix of folks who are new, folks who have been in the roles for a while. So this meeting will be somewhat high level. This new LEA test coordinator orientation will be a little bit more in depth, and we'll get into more specifics about timelines and expectations and things like that. So those are scheduled starting later this month, as well as one, I'm not sure we have the date on here, but there is another one scheduled, I think, in November. So we will also be sharing out all of these dates in a training calendar after this meeting. So you can be sure to put things on your calendar, but wanted to flag, particularly for those who are new to the roles. It's a good opportunity to get a high level understanding of responsibilities. I will also note that we are running the session twice. You do not need to come to both. You can come to either or. And there are several trainings that we'll be offering across the season that do have multiple opportunities to try to fit in different folks' schedules. So if there is a required training and it's offered more than once, we only expect LEA folks to come to one of them. I'm going to pause and ask if there are any questions in the room or in the chat before I turn it over to Asana. Okay, great. Wait,
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving us some information about the WIDA access for ELPS. So the WIDA Consortium designs and implements proficiency. Speak louder. Oh, sorry. Sorry, everyone. The WIDA Consortium designs and implements proficiency standards and assessments for students in grades K through 12 for English learners. The consortium has grown to actually 41 states now, territories and federal agencies. I just checked that this morning. And for DC, we use WIDA for the screener, kindergarten screener, model for online and paper, kindergarten model, access for ELS, online and paper, kindergarten access, and alternate access for ELS. On October 4th this week, in the NGA bulletin, the WIDA AMS site file was released. It is due on October 28th, and we use that file to gather information for who will be coordinating the test for access this year, as well as to get the address that all materials will be sent to. Once again, this file is due to me on October 28th. And if I do not receive a file from an LEA, we're going to go back into the 21-22 site ID file and use that information that is there. Next is the pre-ID assessment quick base application, which is set to be released in mid-October. We use the pre-ID assessment application to confirm the universe of students identified to take access for ELS and the alternate access. OSCE will generate a list of students to register for access based on who is identified as an EL. It'll be about a month for LEAs to submit that information, and the application will close around mid-December. Additional and more specific detailed information will be released in upcoming NGA bulletins. So just take a look out for those when they're released. Here are the 22-23 access trainings. We have a test administrator training scheduled for January 12th. And a test coordinator training scheduled for January 13th, which you all will be able to register for through Eventbrite links that will be released sooner to those dates. Alternate field test, which I've gotten a lot of questions about recently. There is going to be some additional guidance coming out this month, but I just wanted to address some of the questions that I have been receiving via email. Any student taking the alternate access assessment is required to take the field test. This includes kindergarten. IEP teams will take the rein on which kindergarten students they would like to take alternate access. OSCE expects that the field test be administered after the administration of the alternate access test. It is expected to be the same length of the alternate access. And I want to remind everyone there are 4 domains: listening, reading, speaking, and writing, which can take up to 20 minutes per domain for a total test time of 80 minutes. Just keep in mind that this time can vary depending on the student and the environment that you're working in. More information, like I said, will be released in later October. And I also want to remind our LEAs that WIDA is hosting a Q&A webinar on December 1st from 2 to 3:30 p.m. The information to register for that or to find that information will be included in this PowerPoint. And now I'm going to hand it over to Cassidy to talk about some NAEP information.
My name is Cassidy Shenley, and I am the NAEP coordinator here at OSCE. And I'm going to give you a primer on what NAEP is and what we can expect this year. Firstly, what is NAEP? It's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's the only assessment that provides a common measure of student achievement across all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, DODEA, the Defense Department of Defense schools, and Puerto Rico. NAEP allows states to look at their progress over time, compare themselves to national public schools, other states, and what we call TUDAs, or the trial urban districts, the large urban district areas, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, other large cities. And something about NAEP, it's congressionally mandated. We have to take it. In a lot of ways, I know that there are other assessments that are mandatory, but NAEP is mandatory in its own special way. It is legally mandated. And the NAEP results are used for elected officials. Congress looks at them. This year specifically, it's going to get a lot of attention, especially with our long-term trend scores. And the scores are going to be released soon. NAEP's going to get a lot of attention. Sometimes that's very common. I know it's something we look at often in DC, but other states are not as concerned about NAEP scores, but I think that they will be. That's just the rumor on the street. So what is DC doing this year for NAEP? There are actually 3 different sections of NAEP this year. We're doing another long-term trends in a field trial. Field trial is actually canceled. And the long-term trends, DC is not a part of. The only section that DC is part of is the 2023 field test. Just as a note, if your schools out there have not yet been notified, they are part of NAEP. They are not a part of it. We have told everybody that is already in NAEP that they're going to be taking NAEP. So if you have heard that you're taking NAEP, great, you know you're in it. If not, don't have to worry. Not every school will be sampled. So there's a chance that you are not a part of it. What does NAEP look like? Well, first off, our assessment window this year is a little bit further back. Normally it's in January to March. This year, because it's divided into the 3 assessments, it's March 20th to April 14th. But it's very similar to other years. You're going to get 2 sessions, and they could be either math or reading, or one of each for your students. The session durations are going to be 120 minutes long. There's going to be about 25 students sampled out of your school. So that could be a grades 4 and 8. So if you've got a couple hundred 4th graders, you're only going to get 25 that are going to be sampled. And it could be 4th, 8th, or 12th grade, depending on the year. And each student is going to take 1 assessment. They're going to take reading, or they're going to take math. They're not going to necessarily they won't ever take both. And this year we have a questionnaire that does not have a COVID section. First time, the last 2 NAEP sessions, the monthly surveys, and the last time I took NAEP, they all had a COVID questionnaire attached, and this one does not. And for results for this, just recently on September 1st, we had our long-term trend released between age 9 students. This was a kind of our first look to bridge the gap between before the pandemic and, I hate to say post-pandemic, but now. So it's kind of bridging those 2 time periods. So you can see those scores. Those scores are publicly available now. You are more than welcome to go on our nationsreportcard.gov and see those. They are there to look at. However, not yet released are NAEP scores for main NAEP, and that's going to be coming out for 4th and 8th grade math and reading from 2022, the last NAEP that was assessed. You're going to get state and national results. DC will also get, like I said, those large urban districts will get those results as well. So we'll have 3 different things to look at. And those will be available. As you can see, I hyperlinked here. You'll be able to see those scores. We'll link them on October 24th, and those get publicly released. So when we get those scores, we'll put them on the website. You'll be able to see them in totality. So that's everything for NAEP this year. I'll pass it on to MS, I think. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Cassidy. For the MSAA multi-state alternate assessment, excuse me. The MSAA is designed for our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Take a look at the diagram on the left of the PowerPoint. You can see kind of how a student will take the MSAA. They all start off in a session 1, and based off of the answers, they are kind of categorized into 3 different test sessions. This adaptive design allows students to interact with the items that will more accurately reflect the student's abilities. The MSA is annually administered in the areas of ELA and mathematics for students in grades 3 through 8 and 11. And for 22-23, there are the MSAA trainings. We have an administrator training scheduled for February, and I also wanted to highlight the self-paced trainings are required for test coordinators and test administrators, and it will be available in the MSAA system in late February. I will definitely announce the dates once they are confirmed through the NGA bulletin. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Chelsea, to talk about some DLM.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Charland. I'm the Science Assessment Specialist here at OSCE. I oversee the DLM alternate assessment as well as the DC Science assessment. So I'll be back up here to talk about DC Science a little bit. Right now, we're going to talk about DLM. So kind of to go off of what Assad was talking about with MSAAs, DLM is designed for students with the most severe cognitive disabilities. So if your student is found eligible for ALS assessments, they are also eligible for the DLM Science assessment. Here we have these things called essential elements where students are allowed to show their understanding of different science concepts based on different foundational building blocks that we have built into each individual test list. DLM is only administered in grades 5, 8, and high school biology. So unlike your MSAA assessments, there's a little bit more restriction based on who is going to be taking these assessments and in what years. And then you can see we have 4 performance levels for DLM, emerging, approaching the target, at target, and advanced. So for DLM administration, you're only allowed to have 1 test coordinator assigned in the KITE portal for DLM. That test coordinator is responsible for putting in all of your test administrators and assigning them the appropriate trainings and rosters that they need to have. Couple things a little bit tricky about DLM because it is a consortium that serves multiple states, especially for our non-public LEAs and providers. You might have TAs that have Maryland credentials in the DLM portal already. So if you need to link your DLM credentials to your Maryland credentials, you'll have to reach out to me, or you can reach out to the DLM support email and just let them know that you have an educator who is already on the DLM portal for Maryland and now needs to have a DC linked account as well. And this also goes for Virginia, even though I don't think we serve any populations in Virginia as far as our non-publics. The DLM webpage is very, very useful as far as resources. There's a plethora of things on there from past years, past trainings, all the different essential elements and blueprints that you might need to look through, as well as how to access all of the trainings and test lists for each of the individual students. So the test administrator training is required for all test administrators, whether they're returning or they're new. The new test administrator training is a little bit more lengthy, and test administrators need to achieve a score of 80% or higher to be able to even access any information regarding students that are registered in the portal. If you are a returning test administrator, there still is a training. It's a little bit more short, a little more truncated, because in theory, you'll have remembered everything from last year. But you still have to get that 80% pass rate in order to even access any student information, build rosters, or enroll students. So keep that in mind. The training portal does not open until Monday, December 5th. So you have some time to, especially for your test coordinators, to get in there and make sure that you assign all of your test administrators, get all their credentials updated, reach out to me if you are having difficulties linking accounts. But once Monday, December 5th rolls around, you'll be able to get into the Moodle training site and start doing your test administrator trainings. If you want, test coordinators can also facilitate the training through that site if they would like to do a large group training. And again, all of that information can be found in the required training guide, which is also linked on the slide. This year, we're offering 3 DLM trainings, very similar to last year. There is a little bit of a difference. Last year, there was a training that went through instructionally embedded assessments. We decided that that information was not really useful for a lot of our portfolio. So instead, we are doing a DLM test coordinator training, which is a similar training to what we had last year. A new training this year will be the DLM test administrator training. So this is something that we've geared toward individual test administrators. So if you want to share these details, and the registration links for all of these will be available via the NGA bulletin and the overall large training calendar once it's finalized. And then we also have our DLM test coordinator Q&A session. You'll notice this one's only about an hour. So this session is designed for you as either test coordinators or test administrators to bring any sort of questions you have regarding administration, KITE use, Moodle use, Anything at all that is providing some issues for you, you can come and bring those questions. All of these trainings are vendor led, so DLM will be there with all of their expertise to lead these trainings and provide all the details that you need. Obviously, OSSI will also be there for any state specific policy information. But again, all of these links will be available for registration, but these are the dates that we have, and I can provide these to you because we did have those negotiated with the vendors. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what's going on with the DC Science and DLM results release. So for DLM, the student reports are going to be released during the same time as the DC Science reports release. So you should have already been able to access information in the phase 3 of the MCC portal. I think that date was maybe earlier this week, early in October. We're going to have embargoed release of science results for both DC Science and DLM. Mid to late October. We're still waiting on a definitive date for that. And then all science data will be publicly released during our DC report card release date in November. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda for park assessment. Do you have any questions? Are there any questions in the chat? Anybody have any questions? Are we good? It's fine. Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Chelsea. My name is Yolanda Barber, and I am the Math Assessment Specialist. You all met Rachel earlier. Rachel is the ELA Assessment Specialist. So as the Math and ELA Assessment Specialist, we will be the ones supporting LEAs this year with the park test administration and trainings. And so as we progress throughout the year, you will hear from both of us, and you're always free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions. So the PARC assessment, PARC stands for Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. And it is DC's annual assessment of both math and ELA. The PARC assessment measures the knowledge and skills that matters most for students, including understanding complex text, evidence-based writing, mathematical problem solving, and all skills that lead to confidence and success in key academic areas. The PARC assessment will be administered to students in grades 3 through 8, and high school students do also take state assessments in ELA and math online each spring, and we will get into what those assessments are. So this slide gives us a bit more information about PARC testing times and also an update regarding field test units. For PARC math assessment, grades 3 through 8 will have 3 units. Each unit will be 60 minutes. In high school for PARC math, that test is 2 units and it is 90 minutes each. The math assessments for high school include Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. For PARC ELA, 2 units for all tests. In grade 3, each unit testing time is 75 minutes. And grades 4 through 8 and in high school, we have 90 minutes for each unit. In high school, the ELA assessments are ELA 1 and ELA 2, typically taken in grades 9 and 10 respectively. Please note that the field test units for ELA will be in grades 5, 8, and 10. So that's ELA 2. Please keep that in mind as you're creating your test schedule, and you will see this information multiple times between now and the time that the PARC testing starts. We do have a question in person, so I'll pause to take that question. Yes, ma'am.
The field test.
So the question that Natalie asked is the field test still 90 minutes? So for ELA in grade 5 and 8, it will be 90 minutes. I'm sorry, and also for grade 10, it will also be 90 minutes. Any other questions? We'll move forward. So there's a question in the chat that says, do these units require the use of 75 minutes, or are they up to 75 minutes for students to use as they see fit? Once the once all LEAs receive the test administration guidelines within the manual, you will see that you are responsible for providing students that amount of time, meaning it will be a window of 75 minutes. If the student receives accommodations such as extended time, then obviously you're not going to pull them to that time frame. However, students have up until 75 minutes to complete the test. And should they finish early, there's also some guidance in the manual that says what you should do at that time. All right, I think that's the only question regarding field test and times. That's within the chat right now. Okay, thank you. Did not see that question. Is there any wiggle room for the field test, meaning times or grade levels? And that answer is no. So grades 5, 8, and 10, or ELA 2, are going to be the grades that have that additional unit. You should plan to have that unit when you are creating your test schedule, and you must provide students with the amount of time indicated. So that would be 90 minutes that you must provide students to take that additional field test unit, excuse me. All right. Yep, another question in the room.
Actually, feedback. Get all the units, including the field test units, noted in the test coordinator manual and on the PAN site.
So the question in the room, or feedback or suggestion in the room, is it possible to have the field test included within the manual? And if it will be possible to also have it included within PAN, so that, I'm assuming, so that all school test coordinators know where the additional field test units are as they are developing their schedules. I will take that as feedback and suggestion. We are currently working with our partner vendor to determine what exactly will be included in those manuals. And if we are able to do so, then we will. Otherwise, we will continue to voice it to LEAs with the expectation that LEAs then pass that information down to the individual school. And thank you. Moving on to park performance levels. So students' scores fall into one of 5 different performance levels, each describing how well the student met the expectations for their grade, level, or course. Those categories are: did not yet meet expectation, partially met expectations, approach expectations, met expectations, exceeded expectations. Here you're able to see the range of which students can score. So on the park assessment, students have a range of scoring between 650 to 850. I do want to note within this graphic that the cut score for level 5 performance does vary by grade level. So please note that cut score for level 5 performance does vary by grade level. However, the cut score for level 4 is 750. So if you're looking at scores and you're communicating to your schools where we're aiming for, then we of course would want all of our students above 750 for park level performance. Levels 4 and 5 do indicate that that student is on track for the next grade level and ready to leave high school, college, and career ready. So this slide, we're providing some additional information for park assessment resources. Here we do have the link to Common Core state standards. The evidence tables, claim structures, blueprints for park can be found on OSSE's site, which is linked here. The released park items can be found on our assessment vendor site, New Meridian, and the park practice tests are available on Pearson's site. And so you'll have access to those resources. They're all linked here. We also house additional resources on the OSSE Park site, along with the results site and the test coordinator site. So I'll now walk us through an overview of all park and DC science specific trainings. We will be offering both in-person and webinar options for the Park and DC Science LEA Test Coordinator Training and for the Accommodations webinar. Both of these trainings will be required for the LEA Assessment Manager and for the Park DC Science LEA Test Coordinator. And so you'll have the option to attend either in person or online. As Chelsea mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a training schedule and it will be available on the Test Coordinator resources site so that you're able to register for these and make sure that all of the required events are on your calendar. It will also be released within the NGA bulletin. This year, we are also offering in-person workshops for student registration. SRPMPs are everyone's favorite thing ever in life. So we will be offering some in-person office hours to provide some additional support and assistance to LEAs as they are thinking about registering students this year for the PARCC test. This will be an opportunity for you to not only bring questions that you have around SRPMPs, but you may also bring student data so that the team can offer specific assistance. Feel free to bring your laptops. We'll walk through the spreadsheets and be able to make sure that your SRPMP is good to go. The tech coordinator training will again this year be offered by our partners at Pearson, and that will be held online. So you'll see the dates for that here. In March, we are offering a technical assistance training via webinar. For that training, that will more so be what you should do when specific codes pop up on the computer. How do you pause a test? What do you do if a student gets sick and needs to leave early? We will cover all of those things of what can happen during testing and what your response should be. Also, we will note when an issue arises, if you should reach out to the OSCE assessment hotline or if you should reach out directly to Pearson. That will be in March. And then in May, we will prepare you for closing out PARCC DC Science, and that will also be via webinar. Our team is currently recruiting educators to apply for the opportunity to participate in test development events for both PARCC and DC Science. Participants selected for PARCC or DC Science will be part of a pool of educators available to attend various test development events, and that includes item review, bias and sensitivity, range finding, and data review. Each test development event requires a commitment of approximately 3 to 5 days, and it will be held during this school year. On both the application site, which is linked here, and within the NGA bulletin, you will find the approximate timeline for when these events take place. I'm asking for all LEA assessment managers who are on this meeting right now to please share this information with your school leaders. We would like to build a very healthy roster of classroom educators to participate in our test development events. And so we would love to make sure that this information gets down to the school level so that we can effectively recruit educators. Before I pass this back to Chelsea to provide information about the DC Science assessment, are there any questions either within the room or on chat about PARCC test administration?
Yeah. So there were a number of trainings that you listed as in-person versus webinar. So are those in-person trainings truly just in-person or are they hybrid?
That is a great question. I will go back to these slides. I believe this was my first one. So so for the in-person training, that is absolutely in person. And then for the January 10th training, that training will be online.
So we're not hybrid.
We are not providing, thank you for doubling down. We are not providing a hybrid option. We are providing a hybrid option right now as we have attendees in person and online, but we are not providing a hybrid option for those meetings. It will either be in person or it will be online. Are there any other questions within the chat. Dominique is asking if I can share the level 5 park cut scores by grade subject. Dominique, I'm going to note that as something to follow up on, and we can relay that information through the NGA bulletin. And thank you for asking that question. Okay, Stephanie's going to come up to give us some additional information around field test. And then after Stephanie, we'll be turning it back over to Chelsea to talk about DC science.
Yes, I just want to acknowledge Dominique's comment about field test in the chat. So the ELA, so for math and science, field test items are embedded within the assessment, but for ELA, it does have to be a separate unit just because of the way the test is constructed. And we do need to pick a handful of grade levels every year to take part in the ELA field test. We recognize that our 5th and 8th graders do take additional assessments outside of PARC, including health and physical education assessment, and they are the grades for DC science as well. But there is a lot of calculus to do in terms of selecting the field test grade levels every year, and we try to avoid selecting particularly 8th graders during main 8th years, which will be the following year. So we try to use the kind of lighter 8th years to test at those grade levels that will also be part of NAEP. And we also did not want to select 4th grade this year because those students were in 3rd grade last year and took the field test as 3rd graders. So trying to distribute so that cohorts are not taking the field test every year, but also acknowledging that there are other assessments that schools need to be scheduling in, and we try to do the best we can to make sure that it's something that is feasible for folks. But if you do have concerns about being able to fit in that extra field test unit, please do reach out to us and we can talk about ways to perhaps adjust schedules so that make that happen. And if I'm saying the word field test and you're not quite understanding what that is, we can have a whole other explanation about that later. But essentially, field tests are what allow us to test out new assessment items each year and make sure that we are refreshing our assessments so that students are seeing new items across the years. But that is just the high level explanation of those grade levels. And we know that it can be a challenge, but really appreciate your support and work to make it happen. I will now turn it over to Chelsea to walk through some DC science. Apologies for this rolling.
Hello again. So we're going to talk a little bit about DC science. For those of you that don't know, the DC Science Assessment is aligned to the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS, as we so love them. The NGSS standards, the performance expectations are aligned to 3 different dimensions: are SCPs, DCIs, and CCCs, which we'll go into a little bit further detail. We adopted the NGSS standards in 2014 and worked on developing this new assessment to align to those standards. So we actually only just completed our 2nd year of successful DC science implementation this past assessment year. So that's pretty exciting. But if you don't know, this is what our 3 dimensions look like. So we have our disciplinary core ideas, our DCIs. So this is essentially just your content knowledge. Your DCI is your earth science, your physics, your chemistry. Then we move on to our SCPs, our science and engineering practices. So this allows you to show what you're doing to reason scientifically on items. And then our cross-cutting concepts, our CCCs, are things like pattern recognition, scale and proportionality. So things that allow us to connect science ideas to both ELA and math as well. And then there are some PEs that are aligned to an engineering design solution and problem. Those are a little bit more rare, and we don't really assess those too much on our assessments. So like everyone's reiterated, we assess in grade 5, grade 8, and in high school biology. Grade 5 and grade 8 are all the domains. So we have earth science, and biology and what am I saying? Physical science, life science, or space science. And then for high school, we only have biology as our test. So DC Science is not as complicated as Park. Each unit is 45 minutes, and the field test items, like Stephanie said, are embedded within each of the 4 units. So all 4 units are required. Each unit you'll notice, or not, if you're not looking at it, how it's designed is each item is presented as a phenomena, so as some sort of discrete, observable, scientific, interesting going-ons that the students can connect to. And then all of the items are aligned to this phenomena so that they can complete them. We did have some feedback when we had a couple meetings in regards to what students were hearing from students regarding the assessment. And there were a lot of questions regarding domain coverage and blueprint coverage of the items that are presented in each unit. If you have any questions at all about how things are divvied out percentage-wise, the blueprints are posted on the DC Science assessment page. And you can see that for certain grade level assessments, there are, by nature of which performance expectations are available in which grades, there are certain domains that have more items than others. So you may hear students say that there were a lot of biology items on my grade 5 assessment. That could be true based on which PEs we're actually assessing during that time. But again, all the blueprint information is available online if you are interested in looking at that. So the performance levels for DC Science are similar to DLM in that there's only 4. So we have exceeded and met expectations, are proficient, and then have approached and partially met expectations level 1 and 2. Our cut score is 450 for those that have met expectations. And I also want to reiterate here that science results are scheduled for November with the report cards. I spoke to some of these resources a little bit earlier with the blueprints. There's also on our DC Pearson support site, we have a full portal that's full of a lot of different resources for science educators in regards to assessments. So we have our PLDs, if you're interested in how we work to develop our PLDs, our performance level indicators, how we write our items. Like I said, our blueprints are up there. There's also, I want to really call out that there's not only practice tests available on this site, but there's also classroom assessment guides. So I've heard a lot from different stakeholders that are requesting some more resources in their classrooms. I highly suggest using these practice tests so you can at least get a feel for what the items look like. And then the classroom assessment guides really help to structure a little bit of your instruction as well. And again, these are all available on the My Pearson Support site. And then we're going to go into, I'm going to stay up here, sorry. We're going to talk about test administration updates, but let me look in the chat really quickly. Anything about DC Science specifically? We're going to keep it moving. So we're going to go through some updates for this upcoming administration season. A lot of these are just like quality of life updates. So the SRP&P profile, some of the language has been updated to kind of match the language that OSCE uses for reporting. So if you see that some of the column headers have like a 1 or 2 words that are a little bit different, it's just because we wanted to keep it in line with how OSCE reports a lot of this data. But the overall SRP&P template has not changed, so don't have a whole situation about it. Still a huge Excel document. LEAs can also opt out of paper manuals, so if you do not require the test administration manuals that we send out, 1 for every 25 students, you can opt out to not receive those. If you're planning on only utilizing test administrator manuals sparingly. And then shipments of secure materials are sent as individual items. And then I also want to remind you that the window for secure materials, if you need to order anything additionally, is closing in May of 2023. So just a reminder that if you do not complete your SRP&P for all the students that are registered at your school, we will not automatically send out the additional secure materials students might need, like test booklets or answer sheets. So you have to go in and select those as additional orders. And if you do not do that by May of 2023, and we'll have a more specific cutoff date once we are provided that from our vendor, then you will not be able to receive the additional materials that you need for student accommodations. Also new for this year, we have this returning materials form. And Yolanda worked on this. Thank you, Yolanda, for updating this form after we've heard some feedback from LEAs regarding returning and tracking of items that we need to return to Pearson. So now this form will be provided to you when we have all of our other documentation released, but this will detail secure items, their security barcodes or serial barcodes, and where they're going, where they're coming from. So that way, when you're returning the materials back to Pearson and Pearson is asking where things are, you can refer to this sheet that will be saved with your DTCs and be able to look up the serial or the tracking numbers and say, like, this package was delivered to your facility. Maybe you should look for it. Victoria has a question.
Document going to require to be completed by schools, or is this individual option?
So Victoria asked if this was a form that was required for schools to complete, or if it was just a useful tool. I'm going to say both. Not only is it very useful for schools to complete, but it is also required.
We just have to,
Oh,
we have one that.
okay, sounds good. Victoria, she went on to continue to say that they have another form that they use with their LEA. So if you would like to, if you have a form already established in your LEA and you need to maybe work with Yolanda on this new form, you can reach out to her to make sure that all the bases are covered amongst all of the forms. We got some PAN updates. PAN is scheduled to open up to LEAs in January. There's a new user import-export update. So new fields have been added to the file layout to accommodate both deleted and disabled users. So this only really pertains to LEAs that use the user import-export. So if you have a amount of users, now when you export all of your users, and for those of you that don't understand the word user, it's like your test administrators, anybody in your LEA who's in your Pearson Access Next system. If someone's been deleted or disabled, now it'll say it on the export, which has been a little bit of a tricky thing because some users have been accidentally disabled or deleted, and then it's kind of a pain to go in and see why. So now that information is readily available to you, and you can also import the file and restore a deleted user. So if you see that a lot of people were deleted for some unknown reason, you can restore them in the Excel file, import it, and then you don't have to do those things individually anymore. So this is a really handy feature for those LEAs that do have a lot of users or test administrators, things like that in PAN. We also have a new dashboard update. So there's a new drill down functionality added. So if you remember your dashboard, there's a little like handy pie chart if you decide to do the little circle. Now when you mouse over these different aggregated data pieces, you'll see a lot more information's been added about students when they're taking the test, stop the test, continuing the test, ready status. So clicking on the graph will also break it down even further and provide a lot more information in each of those categories. The students in session dashboard has been expanded. So now you can see more students in that dashboard than what was previously allowed, which is also, again, very useful if you're doing larger testing groups for some of those assessments that can be tested together. Victoria has a question.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The user import export update, is that just at the LEA level, or is that also at the?
So Victoria asked for the user import export update. She asked if it was at the LEA level or if it's also at the school level. My impression that it is at both levels, as far as I know. I think Pearson made that available to anyone who's doing a user import export, because I know we also have access to it as well. So I'm pretty sure it's available at both LEA and school level, but I can double check on that for you and then let you know, just to make sure once it's open in January. Yeah. Some more updates to PAN is the organization participation messaging. So for those of you that need to link organizations due to some partnerships we have with other LEAs, It was a little bit difficult if you were unable to find organizations already existing in PAN. Now they've had a little bit more explicit messaging added, so if there's actually not an organization that exists or a partnership that exists, it'll tell you no matches are found, or the organization doesn't found instead of no matches are found. So before, if you would search for something, the only message you would get would no matches found. And it was pretty vague. So now it'll explicitly tell you that organization does not exist, and that way you know you can create it or reach out to us if you need to create these new organizational partnerships in PAN. And now there's also a TTS indicator. For those that don't know, TTS is our text to speech accessibility feature. So now it's going to be displayed next to the student names when they're in the student session and student roster pages. Before, you only really were able to see that just in like your regular registration page. So now if you have students in your session with TTS next to their names, and then you have students in a session that doesn't have TTS, you might have to like look back and say, oh, maybe there's something a little fishy here. But now you should know who has TTS enabled as an accessibility feature, and those students need headphones, things like that. So it kind of helps you provide a little bit more support in those students with that feature. Moving on, TestNav. The current version of TestNav is 8.19.275. So just a reminder for those of you with very old computers or haven't really opened up these testing computers at all, please, please, please make sure that the updated version of TestNav is on these computers before you plan on testing. There's a rumor that it automatically updates, but I don't trust that. So I would just make sure you go into all your devices weeks prior. Make sure you have the most updated version of TestNav so you remove any difficulties the week or a day of testing. And this is also just a reminder as well that there is a inactivity timer set in TestNav for 20 minutes. So if students are not actively engaged in the TestNav portal, it will automatically log that student out. So you can log them back in with just using their username and password. And if this happens, before you used to have to manually go in on the test administrator side and reset their test, but now students should be able to get back in on their own. And before I go into resources, does anybody have any questions regarding PAN updates, administration updates, TestNav updates, other than what I've already answered? I don't see anything in the chat.
Has TestNav been updated since spring?
Victoria asked if TestNav has been updated since the spring. And I want to say no. But I think it will be updated prior to the administration window.
I think it's just to ensure that the most recent version
Yeah.
is installed before you try to start.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some resources. So as always, there's the wonderful Test Coordinator Resources webpage that houses all of this information for any administration resources and updates and forms that you may need. The training calendar will eventually be posted to that website once it's completed. All of our policy documents that Stephanie is going to talk about shortly will also be updated to the website once they're released. You'll also find all of our past trainings and webinars that are recorded to be posted there with all of our corresponding PowerPoint slides. So if you miss a training, those resources are there for you. This site is invaluable when it comes to administering assessments. There's also a lot of manuals that will be online in January, and that's going to be through our DC Pearson support site. We are currently working on those manuals now, so they will be posted pretty soon, hopefully, with all of the updates and things that are included in there. We also have the user guides available. Those haven't changed. So if you need any practice tests, TestNav 8 user guides, those are still available on the Pearson Access Next and TestNav 8 sites. Does anybody have any other questions before I hand it over to Stephanie regarding policy? I have a question? Oh, no, it just says thank you. You're welcome.
So we're transitioning from administration and overview of assessments to really talking about the policies that govern assessment administration. I just want to note, we're talking really fast through a lot of information. Trust that this is not the last time that you will see all of this information, and we will be going into much more detail in subsequent trainings and throughout the next several months as we're getting ready for administration. So if you feel like you missed something, don't worry, we will definitely be communicating about it either in the AGA bulletin or in training, or you're welcome to sign up for technical assistance, which we will talk about later in the presentation. So just want to put everyone at ease. You will not miss something if you're not catching every single thing today. But I do want to now shift us into talking about assessment policy. Much of what I'm going to say here is a repeat of some previews that we gave in August, so I may go pretty quickly, but just wanted to give a high-level overview of what we call the statewide assessments participation and performance policy, which governs what the required assessments are, who's required to participate in them, and some of the rules around who counts for performance and how we calculate assessment participation. So school year 22-23, the required assessments, which we've just talked through, are PARCC, MSAA, and DC Science, DLM, and Access, depending on a student's English learner status and disability status. They may take PARCC and DC Science and Access. They may take MSAA, DLM, and Alt Access if they are in the appropriate grade and subject combination. I do want to note that grades 3 through 8 content assessments in mathematics, in general, students in grades 3 through 8 must take the content assessment aligned to their grade level. We do have a waiver with the Department of Education that allows students enrolled in advanced math in grade 7 or 8 to take the assessment aligned to the course that they're taking. So if a student is taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they may take the Algebra 1 assessment or the grade 8 math assessment. And that decision is up to the LEA. But we do have the option that if a student is taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they may take the Algebra 1 assessment instead of the grade 8 math assessment. One thing to note is that if a student is taking advanced coursework in middle school, such that they advance past geometry while they're still in middle school, they are required to take the Algebra 2 assessment when they get to high school. In terms of alternate assessments, we are in the middle of the alt assessment eligibility process right now. There's been communication about that in the NGA bulletins over the past several weeks, but each year LEAs must apply for students to be eligible for the alternate assessments. And those are the MSA assessment and DLM and alternate access. And those are for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities that meet certain criteria. The alt eligibility process memo and decision form have been posted on OSCE's website, and there are links here, and have also been sent out in the NGA bulletin. Those initial applications for alt assessment are due a week from today on October 14th. And at this point, to the alt assessment QuickBase application that allows you to see all of the students who have applied should be open and working for LEAs as of earlier this week. English learners are required to participate in statewide testing as well. They take both content assessments as well as the English language proficiency assessment, which is Access. English learners who have been in the US fewer than 12 months, we use the first day of the PARCC testing window from the previous year to mark that date. So those recently arrived students are not required to take the English language arts assessments, but are required to participate in math and science and English language proficiency assessments. And also just noting that students who are English learners are required to participate in that English language proficiency testing from grades 8 through 12, regardless of their age. Some additional participation scenarios are covered in the participation and performance policy, which we'll be releasing next week. But just to note that grade and course repeaters are included in both participation and performance reporting. And course repeaters are only exempt from testing if they are taking a second required course in the same year, which is spelled out a little bit more in detail in the policy. But essentially, if the student is taking Algebra 1 as a repeat in the fall, but then taking geometry as a new course in the spring, they would only be required to take the geometry assessment in the spring and not Algebra 1. Yes, Victoria.
So it could, I don't know if this is possible, but is it, what if you have a situation where a student took geometry in the spring and then repeated an algebra course, or had to repeat a course, sorry, geometry in the fall and then repeated a lower level math course in the spring? Would they take the spring course or the, I hope schools don't do that, you know?
So the question in the room is if a student takes the more advanced course in the fall and then repeats a less advanced course in the spring, which assessment would they take? And that is a question that is likely not a very common scenario. So we would ask that you reach out to OSSI for additional guidance on that. But generally, we would expect students to take the more advanced assessment. For students who transfer in to DC as high schoolers and have already advanced past the coursework that is aligned with required assessments, they are not expected to take the assessment in the spring. So if a student has already completed geometry at their in their previous state and come into DC as an Algebra 2 student, they would not be expected to take the geometry test or the Algebra 2 test. That would be
So similar to Corey's mentioning, but slightly different. Is the blanket statement that whatever course you are, if they are repeating geometry, to take the part. So blanket statement, whatever course you're currently enrolled in, you will take the. Yes, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question for folks on the phone, the question in the room was, is the general statement that you take the assessment aligned to the course you're enrolled in generally true? And yes, it is. These additional scenarios are for those more edge cases, but yes, in general, the policy is if you are enrolled in an assessment with a required, or enrolled in a course with a required assessment, you should be taking that assessment. And the cases where there are semester-long courses are detailed in that policy, but also if you do have questions after reading the policy, please do feel free to reach out. And we kind of went over some of those cases, including the reduced schedule. In terms of secondary and adult school participation, the general policy is that if students are on a path to a regular high school diploma, they are required to participate in testing. If students are not on a path to a regular high school diploma, they would not be expected to participate. This slide just gives a general overview of how we calculate participation rate. It's expected that all students who are enrolled and required in courses with required assessments are taking those assessments, and we use certain criteria to determine that universe, that population. The only exceptions are if a student gets a medical exemption for assessment. And for those recently arrived English learners, they are not expected to participate in English language arts assessments for the first year. This slide is also basically, it is copied from the participation policy, so it's just an overview of how participation is calculated for the various content assessments. So I'm not going to get much into that. Performance results are calculated using students who receive a valid score on a required assessment. If a student takes an off-grade test or off policy, meaning a student was not determined eligible for alternate assessment, but takes the alternate assessments, they are not included in performance reporting. And they are included in the participation. They would count against a school's participation for the general assessment. But again, all of these requirements around performance results calculation are outlined in more detail in the policy. Two things I did want to follow up on from our August meeting. We introduced two policies that had been in place prior to 2022 that OSSI relaxed in 2022 due to the ongoing public health concerns. And we reached out to LEAs for feedback on whether it made sense to continue that policy from 2022 or revert back to the pre-pandemic policies. And I want to share today that for both the 30-day school level window and the teacher of record policies, both have been lifted. So they will be, the policies from 2022 will remain in place for 2023, meaning schools or LEAs can administer assessments at any time within the published statewide window. Previously, each school had to administer assessments within 30 consecutive school days. That restriction has been lifted, so you are free to administer the test at any time within the statewide window. LEAs do have the opportunity to specify allowable testing dates for their schools if they so choose. But from the OSSI perspective, you may test at any point within the statewide window. The teacher of record policy previously was that a teacher of record could not serve as the test administrator for their own students unless there was another adult proctor present in the room. That requirement has also been lifted. So the teacher of record may serve as the test administrator for their own students. We do, though, recommend that if a testing group has 15 or more students, that a proctor is present just for ease of administration and making sure that things go smoothly. One additional policy update regarding English language proficiency calculations. So these are the access tests for English learners. The EL tests or the ELP tests are different than content tests in that what is assessed is not necessarily tied to grade level expectations in the same way. And so it does happen occasionally that an English learner, for one reason or another, takes the assessment that is not aligned to their enrolled grade. But there is a way for score correction to, for their scores to be corrected to align with the expectations of their actual enrolled grade, regardless of the grade level assessment that they took for access. So students who, for whatever reason, are taking the incorrect grade level test, OSSI and DRC, the vendor, can correct that composite score to reflect their grade level expectations, and then those students can be included in both participation and performance reporting. And students with corrected scores, or students in general who receive a composite score of 4.5 or greater, will be able to exit EL services. That threshold is 5.0 for kindergarten, but 4.5 for grades 1 through 12. And as I noted, if a student takes an off-grade test and their score is corrected, they will be included in performance reporting, but also in growth calculations for their school. But I do just want to put in a plug here to check and double check before testing that students are assigned to the correct grade level assessment. We know that sometimes mistakes can get through, but we hope that you do everything in your power to be able to make sure that students are taking the correct grade level assessment for access before they are sitting in front of the assessment. I'm going to pause there and invite Lavinia up. I'm looking in the chat for questions. Confirming there is no alternate kindergarten access test. That is correct. And Assad has answered that question in the chat. Thanks, Assad. There is not currently a kindergarten alternate access test, but the field test that is being administered this spring will be used to develop that kindergarten alternate access. And I will invite Lavinia up now to go through test security and test integrity review. I just want to do a time check. We have about 30 minutes left.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lavinia Ringgold, and I am your test security specialist. So let's get started. I know Yolanda stated that everyone's favorite was SRP&P, I beg to differ. I believe it is test security, all things test security. SRPP gives me nightmares, I can tell you. All right, so let's take a look, see where we are. All right, so this is our vision for test security in the district. I'll let you take a look at that one while I put on my reading glasses. That says, our goal is for schools and LEAs to deliver a uniform and equitable statewide assessment program. For assessment to yield fair and accurate results, the assessments must be administered in consistent and standardized conditions. The best way to ensure that occurs is to ensure educators understand and recognize acceptable and unacceptable assessment practices. Do we have any disagreements with that? Great. Here's our test security and integrity overview. You take a look at that, you can see how we flow with test security. We create and publish our assessment policies. We have quite a few. Actually, all of our test security documents have been updated, will be updated and posted to our website. We've just gone over test security guidelines, coordinating statewide assessments. So there's a lot of information that you will have an opportunity to preview shortly. We know about our LEA test coordinators and non-public school test coordinators are trained by OSCE, and then you will train authorized personnel in your LEA and in your schools. And then you will create and submit a school test security plan. The key about your school test security plans is that you want to get it into it sooner rather than later, and that you do not administer any assessment if your plan has not been coded as OSCE approved in the quick-based application. Under no circumstances can you move forward until it has been approved. If it's sitting there saying revisions needed, if it's sitting there saying submitted to OSCE and we haven't reviewed it, pause. Please do not start any testing until it's been approved. During test administration, we monitor and incidents are reported. So we actually send auditors from OSCE out to monitor test administration in your buildings. And if they see incidents, they'll report that. If you come across incidents, you are to report that as well. Test security affidavits are then collected by the LEA non-public school test coordinators and submitted to OSCE. One change we're doing this year is you'll be notified at the end of each assessment window to get that particular affidavit in. That way you're not trying to send a bunch of them at the end of the school year. We're going to try to get them in as an assessment window closes. And we'll give you more information on how that's going to be done. Then we have another investigation process. It's called post-administration. And that's once all testing has been completed. Our vendors have gone through and reviewed and scored the students' results. And if they see some particular anomalies, we've been talking about this with you guys since June, that's when we may have to do a data integrity investigation. Okay, any questions about any of this part of the process? And all these are just overviews, of course. As we get to our test security training, there'll be more details about each one of these to help you along the way. I don't see any questions. I'll go ahead and I'll move forward. So this is just telling you about your test security and test integrity affidavit. We've updated that form. I believe now it's a fillable PDF, correct, Stephanie? Yep, so actually Stephanie updated that, made that a fillable PDF. And this tells you when they should be submitted. So you're going to collect them from within your LEA or school within 10 business days after the close of each statewide assessment window. When access is over, you got that 10 days to collect them. Then we'll move into MSA and DLM. When that's over, you're collecting for that one, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to get them to us within 15 days after you have collected them. And what we'll be doing this year, we're going to include in NGA bulletin the dates that those items are due per assessment. It gives you some room of getting them in and not trying to do 5 assessments, affidavits for 5 assessments in the month of June. Right, major tasks and dates. So we are gonna have test security training coming up soon. And you'll notice, I need to stand up this, I can read. LA test coordinators must complete the training and score an 80% or higher on the quiz. So there will be some asynchronous modules that will be available beginning in November. And those are primarily for our experienced LA test coordinators. We will also have some in-person and webinar trainings, just as we're doing today, in the fall and in the winter. So when that training schedule comes out shortly, you'll know which ones to sign up for and when you can attend and how you can attend them. Test security plans are going to be due 15 days prior to the first day of the school's testing start date. So if the window opens up on March the 5th, and the first day that you want to test is going to be March the 7th, you got to go back 15 days to get that to us. That way we have time to review it, approve it, and then tell you may begin. So it's not the testing 15 days before the testing window, it's 15 days before the day that you want to do your first test session. Okay? And you'll be getting some reminders telling you, hey, these plans are due, let's get them to us, get them to OSCE as soon as possible. The access plans are due in January. The all other assessments, their plans are due by February. And in our bulletins, we will have those specific dates for you.
Draft.
That is your draft. And yes, key, thank you, Stephanie. That's the draft. So you're giving us the draft to let us know when you would like the test. And then you would turn around and give us your completed version. So you will not have a draft and a completed version. The draft automatically becomes that completed version. Okay? Right? No, all right. Got it. All right, incident.
Won't be the last time.
Yeah, you're gonna hear this over and over again. Yeah, that's why test security is our favorite thing. You'll be doing test security in your sleep, right? Incident reporting and monitoring happens throughout the assessment window. You'll be getting reminders if you haven't given us your draft plan, if you haven't gone in and made revisions or haven't given us your final plan, you're gonna hear from us. And not in a punitive way, but in a reminder type way, like, hey, come on, get this to us so that you can get going. And then if there are incidents that take place, we are asking.
Oh my God,
Oh my God, what? Okay, something good on your end. We actually, Scott's honor, just tell us what's going on. And we get that from you all. You will tell us, you will self-report, and then we can help you work through that testing incident. So that you can take corrective action immediately. But what we don't know doesn't help you, doesn't help us. And what we find out later, after the fact, is not good also. Affidavits, it's just another reminder, it's going to be 15 days after the last day of the test administration of each window. So one thing about test security and something I prefer is reminding you so that you don't forget. And if that means remind you of something 2 or 3 times, you're like, oh my God, here she comes again. Why do we have to hear about that? I want you to get through it. And in a way that you will not be facing any type of investigation. Because investigations are not fun.
you mentioned the draft, that like your initial draft is due accept before the actual 15 days. When is the draft due versus the actual test? Are we asking for 2 different dates now?
Yes. So the question was about draft test security plans and when those are due versus the real plan. So the school test security plans are run through a QuickBase app, and you putting your expected testing dates into that plan notifies, it automatically calculates the due date for the plan, because plans are due 15 business days before you are going to be testing, but we won't know what that due date is unless you tell us when you want to start testing. And so the draft plan is meant to notify OSCE of when you plan to start testing, so we know when to expect your completed test security plan.
dates for when that might be?
Yes, so for access, we're asking, and I don't have the exact dates, but we'll communicate them. For access, we're asking that draft plans are submitted by mid-January so that we know when to expect your final plans. And then for all other assessments, we're asking for draft plans by mid-February. So it'll calculate what your final plan is. And that is to help both you and OSSI understand when you need to have those plans finalized in order to test according to the schedule that you would like to.
Thank you. We may have those dates in here somewhere. Right, test security training reminders. Reminding you again that you must take the asynchronous modules and pass the quiz with a score of at least 80%. And that you get to identify 3 LEA test integrity coordinators, 1 for access, 1 for MSA DLM, 1 for Part DC science. Or if you're a super LEA assessment manager, you do them yourselves. But I think in most cases, you will assign it to someone else in your LEA or in your building. And that will be the point of contact that we'll be communicating with for that particular assessment. After you finish the quiz, then you can submit your plan. Can't do the plans before you do the quiz and pass. And you're encouraged to, our access folks are encouraged to complete their training early. And those training dates will come out as soon as we release our test training calendar so that you can get started. Another reminder, individuals who are new to the role must attend a live test security training, and that's either in person with us in this room, or you can do it via a webinar. And the trainings that you will see on the test training calendar will tell you whether you're doing how to sign up for the webinar or how to sign up to do it in person. Live test security trainings will be offered multiple times in the fall and winter. You will only need to attend one of those. If you see the purpose being the same, repeated over a number of sessions, you come see us doing one of those, only one. And again, if you've been an LEA assessment manager or LEA test coordinator in prior years, you can attend a live training session, or you simply do the training modules at your own time. And that would be the training module and the quiz. And we will follow up with you. If you've taken the quiz and your score is 80, that's not passing. You have to get 80% of the total amount of points that the quiz is for. And I think that quiz is what, 113? Do you remember, Yolanda, Stephanie? The total points?
But
The passing is like,
it was 110 last year.
okay, so we will take a look at that. And that way, if you've taken the quiz, you go, oh, I got 80, I passed. And then your plans come in and we go, you gotta go take a pass the quiz. So we'll keep you abreast of that. We had a couple of those last year. The same reason why I got it wrong. I got an 80 and I was like, I passed. Yeah. I'm just a math person, absolutely math person. Okay, so important. The bullet number 2, bullet number 3 are very important. The training must be completed prior to developing your school test security plans. We will pause you and not review your plans if you submit the plan and you haven't passed the quiz. But we'll let you know that we need a higher score. And if you do not complete this training, it may result in you being ineligible to serve in the role of the LEA assessment manager, LEA test coordinator, and or non-public school test coordinator. Any questions at all about training for those 3 roles? Okay. Good. All right. Required non-public school test security training. I'll let you take a look at that. See it? Yes.
There's a question.
Okay, question in the chat. Is Genevieve? So question is, earlier it said the training, test security training was in asynchronous modules. Are those only for those who are not new to the training? That's correct. The modules, the async modules are for those who are experienced. If you've been a non-public test coordinator, an access LEA assessment manager in a previous year, you don't have to come to a live training, you go right through the modules. Those who will be attending the training will be doing the modules also. But you will have to spend time with us either live or at a webinar first. Okay, any question? All right, back to our non-public school test coordinator, test security training. So our non-public school test coordinators are required to complete test training each year. If you're new to this role, you will attend a live training session, either in person or via the webinar. A separate test security training webinar specifically for non-public school test coordinators will be held in addition to the LEA focus sessions. So we'll do one that's specifically geared to the non-public school test coordinators. Information provided will prepare our non-public school test coordinators on how to complete and submit required documentation, how to train their staff and administer access, MSA DLM, PARC, and DC Science. Same type of information that we'll be sharing with our other LEA assessment manager school test coordinators as well, but we're going to give this specifically to the non-publics. The non-public school test coordinators can attend this non-public focus training, but they can also attend the LEA focus training as well. And when you see the test training schedule, we will talk about the purpose and let you know which one is non-public focus, which one is LEA focus. So that you may attend the one that works best for you and plan accordingly. Looks something like this. You'll be getting this calendar soon. School test security training sessions. You'll notice on January 17th, we mentioned that this will be repeated on February 3rd. Whatever training that one is, that is test security non-access participants. Meaning if you're not administering access, you can come to this training on January 17th versus the one on January 13th, which is about access. And then if you come to this one on February 3rd, you'll notice it's the same one being given. And if you come into one on January 17th, it's the same one given on February 3rd. You don't have to do both of those. You do one or the other. So we want you to make sure you're looking at the purpose and who the training is for, and then choosing your dates accordingly. This is not our full training calendar, just a couple we wanted to share with you. Victoria.
Just confirming, if we go to any one of those, it's all the same topics, or if we go to December 13th, are we only getting information about access?
Access and test, access, school test security plans and test security.
So we have to go to another.
No.
The December 13th is encouraged for access because it's so much earlier than the other assessments, but it's the same information in all three.
Okay, any other questions? Great, thank you. Test integrity and test security documents. Overall policies and the guidelines, test security guidelines are consistent with policies from the 2021-2022. So our test security guidelines from last year is pretty consistent with the one we've updated for this year. Two updates, Stephanie mentioned the last one about teacher of record. And then we have some formatting updates. So those are two differences that you will see in the new test security guidelines that will be coming out shortly. Yeah, good read. You have nothing to do on a Sunday, no good Hallmark movies on, read test security guidelines. I say print it out. It's better to read in your hand so you can highlight what you want. But in any case, thorough review and update. Teacher of record. Then we have one other one there. The 30-day window.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, and both of those are the same as last year.
Yeah, I'm gonna push you forward. We have a lot to do.
They love this. So here are the documents Look, this is test security, right, people? So here are the documents. They will be posted to the website shortly. Yeah, look at that. Right, this talks about our plans. Yep, we've talked about these, so let me take a look quickly and move. Go again.
Those are the dates.
There you go. January 17th for the access draft plan, February 15th for all other draft plans. Okay? All right, all things test security. Highlight of your day. Any questions? Anything in the chat? Anybody say anything? None? Okay. Well, you know how to reach me if you have any questions. And I'm now gonna turn it over to you, Sarah.
Yes.
You go.
Thank you again, Olivia. Hello, everyone. Gonna give some quick information about the testing and accommodations guides. Here we go. So the testing and accommodation guides, also known as tags, will be available this month. Not much has changed with them. We still have part 0, part 1, and part 2. Part 0 is the accommodations guide for students with disabilities. Part 1 will be for, actually, no, I'm sorry, that is not correct. Part 0 is accessibility features and administrative considerations guides for all students. Part 1 will be for students with disabilities, and part 2 will be for our English language learners. These will be available on the OSSE website and will also be announced in the NGA bulletin, upcoming NGA bulletins. And as a reminder, we do have 2 scheduled accommodations, webinars. One is in person and one is a webinar.
Those are specific to Park and DC Science.
Specifically for Park and DC Science.
Vendors will also provide training for the other assessments on company.
And our vendors will also be providing other trainings for our assessments. And now, just a quick update on the alternate assessment eligibility process. On October 4th, our LEAs were given access to view applications in Click. And here's also a reminder that on October 14th, the deadline for LEAs to upload alternate eligibility forms in SEDS will be there, will approach. The alternate eligibility participation decision form is an annual document that needs to be submitted for all students wanting to be considered for alternate assessments. And I'm gonna hand it back over to Rachel to give us,
One question in the chat.
oh, I'm not even able to see it.
Asking how you access Click.
Can access Click through going QuickBase.
You need access to Click.
Yeah, I don't think Click is available for non-public, it may be.
Second.
So the question in the chat is how do you access Click? I believe Click is only available for LEA users and not non-publics, which is just another plug for non-public school test coordinators to coordinate with your LEA assessment managers for those students from LEAs, students who serve from those LEAs. So if you are a non-public and have a student from DCPS, for example, you would be coordinating with the DCPS LEA assessment manager to make sure you are appropriately identifying the students who may need an alternate assessment. So this is just a plug to make those connections, and if you need help knowing who that correct contact person is, please reach out to OSSE and we can connect you with those LEA folks. But for non-public managers, I do not believe that you get access to Click, and that application will go through the LEA.
Thank you. Questions before I hand it to Rachel?
Thank you. We have made it to the end valiantly. Welcome to your last 8 minutes. You have done the first hard step of keeping in touch with us by attending this meeting either virtually or in person. It's nice to see people in person. We'll be hosting other NGA meetings throughout the school year. Our next one will be in December, followed by February, and then we'll see you in other ways, many other ways, throughout the remainder of the spring, and we'll close the school year on June 6th. If you haven't done so already, make sure that, I'm gonna skip that, because you'll just find out when you get here. Kidding. We'll make sure that all of the NGA meetings are relevant to what you'll need to know, probably most immediately, and then hinting at and reviewing what you'll need later on. If you want to get a hold of us, there are ways beyond the NGA meeting, and one is to go ahead and sign up for a technical meeting, and you can get any one of us. So if you have a very specific question and you're like, hey, I just need a call to go over this process, in addition to emailing us, you can also set up time on a joint calendar that is linked here in this slide. Make sure to let us know what specific questions you have so we get what you need addressed most expediently and correctly. Well, this is the thing. We want to make sure that you register for the NGA bulletin. It's also how we communicate information quite regularly, weekly, if not every other week. And please feel free to include other members of your team so that everyone's getting the same information. Or the easier it is for all of us. You can also email us. We have a sort of general email address, aussie.assessment@dc.gov. It's a great way if you're like, I don't even know how to begin to address this or where to put it. Do I go and sign up for a meeting? Do I get an NGA bulletin? We'll make sure that we get those questions addressed through aussie.assessment@dc.gov. And please make sure that you are identifying both yourself as the LEA assessment manager and any LEA assessment coordinators, as well as non-public coordinators through this form. Question came up yesterday, I'll address it here, which was, I've just identified someone else. Can I, like an additional assessment manager, or different additional coordinator, can I add them? There's no limit to those fields. So if you have a couple of people you need to enter both first and last name in one. Resubmit. We ask that you get this done technically, like today, next week, or today, just set a new deadline. Anyway, it is due next week, but you can update this throughout the year. We understand that what happens in our LEAs is constant change. And so feel free to readdress this, or if it does not fit in the box, literally, email us. We'll make sure that we either make a new box or make it fit for this, not for some of the policy. All right, any general questions? Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, question in-house.
Can you provide LEAs with any information on the OSCE-initiated LEA-led investigations?
Yeah. There's a question in the room about OSCE-initiated LEA-led test integrity investigations for spring 2022. I know we've spent all this time talking about 2023 because we're looking forward, but there is still some tying up to be done of spring 2022 because we get some additional analysis from our vendors pretty late. And so those test integrity investigations from last spring's tests will be happening throughout this fall. In terms of timeline, we shared, I believe in August, that we would OSCE would notify LEAs if required to conduct an investigation by mid-October. Next week is mid-October. And we're likely still within that time frame. It would likely be in the next couple of weeks that OSSI will reach out for, to LEA assessment managers if there are schools that we would like you to conduct a test integrity investigation for spring 2022. With that reaching out comes a whole process guide of the steps that LEAs are expected to take in their investigation, the interviews that they need to conduct, who needs to be involved, documentation that's needed. So all of that information will be shared with LEAs if OSSI determines that an investigation is necessary. But more broadly, that information about what is involved in a test security investigation will also be posted on the website just for general awareness. But we will be contacting specific LEAs if necessary within the next couple of weeks. Any other questions about all of the things that we have talked about today? I know we've about a minute and a half. Just as a closing slide, wanted to share all of the resources. So throughout the assessment administration season, the OSSI Office of Assessments will be communicating lots of information, sharing a lot of different documents. It's a lot to take in, and I know that you all are very, very busy, and there are other things as part of your job other than test administration. But just want to thank you in advance for the partnership and your attention to all of the various communications that will be coming your way from the Office of Assessments. I know 2022 was a rebuilding year kind of all across the board in getting back into the swing of assessment administration. Our team has made some process improvements or are intending to make some process improvements for 2023 to hopefully make it an even smoother process this year. And we know that we can't do it without your support and your hard work. So just want to thank you in advance for that. And please do feel free to reach out to us, either individually, team members, or to the OSSI.assessment inbox, and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. And thank you for your time this afternoon, ending exactly at 3 o'clock. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. But thanks, everyone. Have a